Chihiro was a little glue sniffer who lost his mom and became obsessed with zombie girls to cope. However, everything changes when he finds a book on resurrection and makes a zombie potion, but accidentally transforms the most popular girl into a zombie who falls in love with him. It all starts with Chihiro watching his favorite zombie movie and fantasizing about rising up his one true love, a zombie girl. He had been this way ever since tragically losing his mom and struggling to move on with the rest of his family. However, he eventually finds some comfort in a stray cat he adopted called Babu. But even that gets snatched away from him when one day, Truck-kun sends Babu to heaven as well. After burying Babu, Chihiro feels fed up of losing his loved ones when he suddenly remembers a mysterious book he found in a relative's house. He quickly finds the book, and after going through its pages, he realizes it's a recipe for a resurrection potion. With this, he digs up Babu's body and heads to an abandoned hotel where he hopes to bring Babu back, even if it's as a zombie. After days of trying to create the potion, he realizes that the page containing the most important ingredient has been damaged. Luckily, he can tell that it's some sort of poisonous plant, so he tries a bunch of them, but they all fail. Suddenly, he hears someone screaming outside, so he runs to a window and is shocked to see Ria cursing into an old well. Curious, Chihiro pops a soda and watches as Ria begs God to stop her dad from taking pictures of her with no plot armor on. Ria's father, Dan, was a control freak who would make her strike weird poses without plot armor on all her birthdays so he could take creepy pictures of her goods. When she grew older, she tried standing up to him, but he started going after anyone that tried to get close to her. So she realized just how powerless she was and forced herself to continue posing so he would stop making people disappear. Hearing this, Chihiro dropped the soda bottle from shock, and Ria finally notices him. Minutes later, they both sit in awkward silence in the hotel until Ria begs him not to tell anyone and is ready to do anything he wants. As she gets closer, he takes a peek at her goods and realizes why Dan likes taking pictures of them, but tells Ria not to feel embarrassed. However, she still wishes for someone to unalive her so she can be reborn into a better life. Just then, Ria asks why he was even in the hotel in the first place. So he explains his plan to bring Babu back to life. When he admits that it's a little selfish, she says it's not, since Babu was very dear to him. The next moment, Chihiro reminds her of when she promised to do anything and asks if she can become his zombie lab rat since she already hates her life. Ria gets shocked to hear this, but Chihiro laughs cause it was just a joke. Ria then asks Chihiro if he has a girlfriend, but he says he's only interested in dating zombie chicks. She decides to tease him and asks if he would take responsibility if she becomes a zombie, but Chihiro turns red like a monkey's backside, so she tells him to think about it before leaving. The next evening, she returns to the hotel to help Chihiro, but wonders why he hasn't completed it yet. After telling her about the damaged page in the guidebook, he explains how he spent the last few days testing every poisonous plant he could get his hands on and failing miserably. The next moment, Ria tells him to wait and runs off to get something, so Chihiro decides to keep himself busy, thinking it must be something important. Hours later, he wonders why she hasn't returned and decides to go take a look, only to see her about to slip off the edge of a cliff. He immediately runs over and manages to grab her just as she is about to fall off. Moments later, they get back inside, and Chihiro finally asks Ria if she has a brain defect because she could have literally lost her life. Surprisingly, she claims it wouldn't have been a problem because he would have brought her back to life, and this causes Chihiro to realize just how messed up her mind is. He also asks why she was climbing such a dangerous cliff in the first place, so Ria explains that the flowers growing around the tree are extremely poisonous. Chihiro gets surprised because the hortensia flower is very common, so Ria explains that it's used in her family's crest, and Dan always warned her not to ever eat the leaves because they can send a full-grown man to the afterlife in minutes. After recalling that his grandfather Jagaru usually eats the leaves, Chihiro decides to trust Ria since he doesn't have much of a choice. Minutes later, he completes it, but as he turns to grab Babu's body, Ria slips some of the potion into a small bottle she brought along with her. After pouring the rest of the potion down Babu's throat, Chihiro waits for the resurrection, but quickly realizes that a bust, so he decides to pack it up for the night. Once outside, Ria suggests trying again tomorrow, but Chihiro decides to give up and says it's not fair to Babu. Ria initially gets upset because this means they can't hang out together again, but she hides the pain and promises to come for Babu's funeral later. As Chihiro walks off, Chihiro notices that she sprained her ankle, So he does what every gentleman would do and picks her up like it's nothing while she squirms like she just met Prince Charming. After dropping her in the back seat, he rides to her family's estate, but she makes him stop on the outskirts and says she uses a secret path to sneak in and out. At this, Chihiro leaves and Ria sneaks in, without realizing that Dan has been watching this entire time. Just as she makes it to the back door, he calls her and shuts her brain off with a brutal slap. Much later, Chihiro decides to prepare Babu's grave, but at the same time, his plot-heavy cousin, named Renko, is using the bathhouse beside him. She hears him and sticks her head out the window to ask where he has been, but he gets shocked to casually see her melons and asks why she is here. After reminding him that she comes over whenever she wants, they head up to his room, and she gets dressed before demanding to know why he has been running off alone for the past few days. Chihiro immediately cooks up a lie about taking long walks by himself, but Renko tells him to stop the cap because he only started disappearing after what happened to Babu. After spotting the cooler, she grabs it and fights him off while trying to open it. The next moment, Babu jumps out and takes off into the night, leaving Renko traumatized while Chihiro gets excited because the potion actually works. Meanwhile, Ria is having the worst night of her life because Dan decided to pull her out of school after almost breaking her cheekbones. However, instead of crying herself to sleep, she decides to end it all and drinks every drop of the potion she swiped before falling into bed and waiting for her last breath. The next day, she wakes up and gets confused because she shouldn't have survived that much poison. She quickly gets ready for school and joins her parents for breakfast. When her mom, Aria, asks why she tried to sneak out, she comes up with a dumb excuse to avoid the truth. But Aria only cares about how Ria's actions affect her image as the school principal. Dan stops her from raising her voice at Ria, but then she storms off without having anything to eat. Dan quickly takes the opportunity to apologize for the beating, but Ria tells him not to bother because she has accepted it as the result of her disobedience. Hearing this causes Dan's heart to flutter, so he cups her face and says he is the only one capable of protecting her. Just then, he notices her uniform and reminds her that she will be homeschooled. As the butler shows up to talk to him, Ria leaves but decides to eavesdrop on their conversation. She then learns that they are planning to literally chop Chihiro's nuts off. While all this is happening, Chihiro is still delirious with excitement over the fact that he brought Babu back to life. Renko, on the other hand, is worried that he might have just unlocked a door to the underworld. But after seeing that his little sister, Miro, is not bothered at all, she asks why. Miro then admits that she never even expected her stupid brother to pull off a zombie resurrection. After Chihiro tells them to focus on the fact that he just cracked the code to eternal life, Renko points out the undead look in Babu's eyes. When Chihiro says Babu only needs a little glitter, Renko genuinely becomes scared and tells the zombie-obsessed lunatic that he might have just made Walking Dead a reality for everyone. Chihiro finally starts to understand the risk involved with Babu being a zombie. But at this moment, Babu runs off. Chihiro immediately chases after him, and after seeing that Renko is also following, he tells her to mind her own business. Renko replies that she is only looking out for him because he clearly doesn't have enough brain cells to make rational decisions. Just then, Babu enters a flood drain, so Renko stops, thinking the chase is finally over, but Chihiro climbs in to find him. Around the same time, Ria sneaks out of the house again to save Chihiro from Dan, and Aria, who had been watching her this entire time, decides to go keep him distracted. By then, Renko has just followed Chihiro into the flood drain, but she eventually gets stuck. So Chihiro continues following Babu until they end up at the abandoned hotel. While he starts to wonder why Babu seems to be connected to the hotel, his school buddy Yasutaka accepts that he will never get Kitty in this life, so he decides to give another friend named Mogi backshots instead. Thankfully, Ria shows up just in time to save your eyes from the horror, but when she asks for Chihiro, Yasutaka freezes in shock and wonders how on earth she knows him. Ria eventually tells him not to worry and leaves to find Chihiro on her own. But the butler spots her on the road and calls Dan to ask if he should bring her back home. Dan then tells the butler to follow her because she might lead them to Chihiro. Around the time Ria finally gets to the hotel, Chihiro finds Babu munching on the leaves he used to perfect the potion. After recalling that this is the same spot where he saved Ria the other day, he sees her on the cliffside and wonders what she could be doing up there at this time of the day. The next moment, Dan shows up and promises to forgive Ria if she stops whatever she is doing and follows him back home. As he tries to grab her, she smacks his hand away and says he has to stop acting like she is his property. While Chihiro watches, Dan asks Ria if she just wants freedom to go out whenever she wants, or if she wants to experience love with a loser like Chihiro. Ria freezes, unable to give him an answer, but this tells Dan all he needs to know, so he grabs her hand to take her home. As Ria begins to struggle with him, Babu runs up to help her, and upon seeing him, Dan gets terrified because he is allergic to cats. He immediately tells Ria to stand back, but she ignores him to take a closer look at Babu. Upon realizing that Chihiro's potion worked, she gets excited, but then Dan tries to hit Babu. Ria tries to block him, but she gets pushed over the edge. While they all watch in horror, she dives headfirst into a tree stump that tears through her insides and bleeds to death. Chihiro quickly rushes over and breaks down at the sight of her mangled body. After recalling his promise to bring her back as a zombie, he gets scared because he never actually planned to go through with it. As he turns his back on her, he hears her subtly calling his name and turns around to see Ria getting back up with her insides leaking out. She slowly walks over and reminds him that he promised to take responsibility if she ever becomes a zombie. Despite being terrified, Chihiro accepts, so she falls into his arms, while the butler becomes convinced that God just gave Ria a second chance. As Dan gets overwhelmed with the guilt of murdering his own daughter, the butler tells him to look. The moment he sees Ria on her feet, he runs over to get her to the hospital, but she pulls her arm away from him and says he has no right over her because his daughter doesn't exist anymore. Later that day, he becomes depressed and locks himself in the bathroom, while the housemaids start spreading rumors about how Ria ran away from home to escape his psychotic obsession. Just then, Arya hears them and asks for an explanation, so they explain how Dan claimed Ria has refused to come back home. While she immediately heads towards the bathroom to talk to him, the maids notice that she reeks of vodka and continue gossiping about how she started getting pounded on the side because Dan stopped giving her back shots. A couple of minutes later, Arya storms into the bathroom and demands to know what the maids have been yapping about. But Dan is completely delirious and continues mumbling about Ria abandoning him. Thankfully, the butler explains that Ria has refused to come back and is now staying with Chihiro. Upon hearing his name, Dan recalls how Ria left with Chihiro and becomes convinced that he only has to take care of her little boyfriend to bring her back home. So he pulls himself out of the bath to start making plans while Arya stares at the meat saber she dreams of every night. By then, Chihiro is trying to figure out how Ria is easily stitching herself up. So she explains the compulsory sewing classes everyone takes in her school. After completing the stitches, she gets excited because she can no longer feel pain, but Chihiro grabs her and asks how she can be happy after everything that just happened. When she suddenly says it's her first time being in a boy's room, Chihiro starts to think she lost some of her brain cells in the fall. Much later, she sticks her head out the window to take in the view and Chihiro struggles to keep his eyes off her dump truck. When she suddenly calls him to see Babu, Chihiro notices that his eyes are finally back to normal. But Ria gets more curious about Babu's voice and asks if it's an effect of the zombie solution. After Chihiro explains that Babu has always had a weird voice, Ria tells him that Babu really loves the tree he is sitting on. This causes Chihiro to realize that she can understand Babu, but as he wonders what else might be different about her, she notices his creepy staring and asks if he would prefer if she were like the zombies he watches in movies. He ignores this and asks if she is really okay with being a zombie, and after saying yes, Ria reminds him to take responsibility for her new life. Chihiro finally decides to ask what she means by taking responsibility for her life, but instead of a straight answer, Ria asks him to take her to all the nice spots in town so she can finally experience a normal life. After reminding her that there is nothing normal about her current state, Chihiro asks Ria if living a regular life is really all she wants. All of a sudden, Ria grabs him and asks if there is anything wrong with that, but before he can answer, she starts getting closer for a kiss. However, Renko shows up and starts yelling at Chihiro for ditching her. While sticking out his head to answer, he hides Ria and tells Renko not to come inside. Chihiro then tells Ria to stay inside and leaves to meet Renko, while Ria wonders why she suddenly feels like kissing him. Minutes later, Chihiro takes Renko to a river and apologizes for ditching her before telling her not to worry about Babu anymore. She finally stops fuming, but as they both sit to talk things out, Yasutaka calls out to Chihiro while running towards them. Chihiro immediately tries to bail, but Yasutaka drops to his knees and begs to meet Ria. Upon hearing this, Renko recalls when he asked her about Ria days ago and asks if this is why, but Chihiro denies even knowing Ria and says they only bumped into each other by chance. Mogi then says they should be excited for Chihiro because he must have given up his obsession with zombies if he fell for Ria. Upon hearing this, Chihiro decides to keep the truth to himself, because they might freak out if he explains what really happened. Meanwhile, Ria has just gotten tired of trying to figure out who Renko is to Chihiro, so she decides to take a bath. However, after turning on the water, she realizes that she can't tell if the water is hot or cold, but she decides to focus on the fact that she can finally take a shower without Dan secretly watching her. As she starts playing with the toy she found, Jogaru suddenly walks in. Ria quickly covers the good stuff to protect his fragile brain, but Jogaru suddenly pounces and desperately tries to grab her cakes while calling her Sada. Ria eventually manages to escape and closes the bathroom door with Jogaru still inside before running up to Chihiro's room. Just then, Miro returns, and Jogaru also tries to grab her plots, but she easily stops him and asks why he keeps calling her Sada when his late wife's name was Kyo. By then, Ria has started questioning her life choices and wonders if Dan's creepy birthday shoots are better than getting a surprise attack from Chihiro's psycho grandpa. Much later, Chihiro finally returns and is shocked to see her spread eagle on the floor, so he hurries to get her covered and warns her of the risk of catching a cold. After she reminds him that zombies can't get sick, he realizes that he hasn't even taken advantage of this opportunity to learn what it's like to be a zombie. He starts by asking Ria if she gets tummy aches, but she reminds him that she doesn't have much of a tummy because of the accident. She also tells him that it has been a lot more difficult to move his body than when she first turned. Chihiro then takes a closer look at her arms and realizes that her body is still decaying, which basically means that she will soon be incapable of moving. After carrying Ria over to his bed, Chihiro covers her up and decides to spend the night in the temple. However, after minutes of struggling to fall asleep, he continues obsessing over a way to stop Ria's body from decaying. Early the next day, he heads to Miro's room to ask her for a book about embalming that he once saw her reading. After explaining that a friend of hers borrowed it recently, Miro asks why he is suddenly interested in preserving bodies, but Chihiro tells her to forget it. Minutes later, he draws up a poster to keep everyone out of his room and turns the air conditioner on to preserve Ria's body for as long as possible. He then pays close attention to her, hoping to track any slight movement, but his dad, Dune, suddenly calls out to him. Startled, Chihiro blocks Ria's body and says he will be out in a couple of minutes before realizing that leaving Chihiro in his bed was a dumb move. He quickly creates a makeshift bed in the closet, but while trying to move her into it, he slips on one of his movies and ends up in a position that virgins like you have been dreaming of for ages. Right then, Dune calls out to him again, so he quickly places Ria in the closet and explains that her stiffness should be gone before nightfall. After hearing her insides begging for food, he also promises to get her something to eat and heads out. Minutes later, while having breakfast, Jogaru mistakes the tofu for something else, so Dune explains how it tastes to help him remember. Chihiro, on the other hand, starts thinking about Ria's wish to experience a normal girl's life. Curious, he asks Miro what it's like being a normal chick. But Miro gets confused by this and asks if he got enough sleep. Once again, Chihiro tells her to forget about it, to avoid looking suspicious. Around the same time, Renko, who has just made a delivery at Ria's house, sees a chick named Helen crawling out of a nearby bush. Helen explains that she wanted to figure out why Ria stopped showing up at school, but Renko is already tired of talking and tells her to try using the doorbell instead of acting like a creep. She then heads out, but Helen follows her and continues running her mouth about how amazing and hot Ria is. Eventually, Renko gets tired of listening to a shameless bot and walks off on her to hopefully find someone better to hang with. Meanwhile, Chihiro's family has just started a full house cleanup since school is out for the day. Chihiro tries to get done with his work as fast as possible so he can focus on Ria, but Dune calls him again to ask why he has already adopted a second cat when they only just buried Babu. Chihiro then tells him to chill because it's still Babu, but Dune gets confused and fears that Chihiro has finally lost it. To prove it, Chihiro asks Jogaru if he has seen Babu around, but all Jogaru can remember is seeing his precious Sada in the bathroom. Before Chihiro can ask who Sada is, Jogaru says something about creating a resurrection potion in the past. Naturally, Chihiro gets intrigued and asks for more details, but Jogaru's brain hits the factory reset button, so Chihiro gives up. Just then, Miro offers to clean his room since it's probably packed with junk, but Chihiro immediately stops her and says he can do it himself. Before she can ask why, Renko shows up with lunch, and Dune immediately starts praying that Chihiro will be lucky enough to find a wife like her one day. Renko then uses this opportunity to tease Chihiro about still being single before telling him about Ria's disappearance. She also explains how everyone in her family seems to be working extremely hard for something, but Chihiro tries to change the topic to avoid talking about it. Renko continues talking about it and says Ria probably left home to be with some loser she fell in love with. When she asks Chihiro for the kind of relationship he has with her, Chihiro continues saying that he and Ria are complete strangers who just bumped into each other once. He then asks Renko why she is so curious about it, and Renko quickly acts like she is just looking out for him, like any responsible older sister would. Moments later, Renko finally decides to leave, so Doom tells Chihiro to clean a spot at the back. However, while he heads inside to clean it, Renko suddenly decides to grab a movie from his room, so she heads up to take it. Once inside, she notices a strand of hair that is obviously too long and dark to belong to either Chihiro or Miro. She quickly decides to take a look around and eventually finds the bed he kept for Ria in the closet. At this moment, Ria, who somehow climbed to the top of Chihiro's cabinet, jumps in on Renko and holds her down while grabbing her milkers. After realizing that it's Ria, Renko pushes her off, but this causes Ria's cuts to reopen. When Ria suddenly rips her shirt off, Renko starts screaming, so Chihiro runs back up and drags Ria away. However, in the heat of the moment, they lock lips, and Ria starts crushing his insides with her zombie strength. When Ria finally releases him from her bone-crushing hug, Renko immediately starts interrogating Chihiro to know why the chick he keeps denying has been holed up in his room this entire time. She then takes a close look at Ria and realizes what she is. But as Chihiro tries to explain what happened, Renko refuses to hear a single word from him and starts attacking with anything she can lay her hands on. While this is happening, Ria hears Babu calling out to her, so she starts crawling out the window. By the time Chihiro notices, it's already too late, so he begs Renko to go help Jagaru with his bath and runs out before she can say no. However, as he crawls on the roof to reach Ria and Babu, Dune spots him and asks what is going on, so Chihiro says he is trying to feed Babu. Dune then tells him to make it quick since they still have a lot of cleaning to do, so Chihiro quickly catches up to Ria and Babu, only to find them eating the same poisonous leaves he used to make the potion. He gets confused by this until Ria starts looking a lot more human than usual. The next moment, she completely regains her sanity and asks Chihiro why she is out in the open with only a towel covering her body. After he gives her a shirt, Jagaru shows up with Renko and commends Chihiro for resurrecting his precious Sada. When Chihiro asks him who this Sada person he keeps mentioning is, Jagaru ignores the question to explain that resurrected zombies like Ria and Babu obviously need the leaves to keep their bodies alive. For the first time, Chihiro realizes that Jagaru still has a functioning brain, so he tries to listen to more advice, but Renko starts trying to shake off the old creep. Thankfully, he manages to hold on to her and further explains that Ria needs constant exercise as well as a steady supply of the leaves to stop her body from decaying for as long as possible. Just then, Renko finally manages to escape Jagaru's grip, and Dune, who just showed up with Miro, gets confused and asks if she knows what is happening. But Miro is just as clueless as he. Jagaru then tells Chihiro that the decaying process cannot be stopped forever. But as Chihiro tries to ask more questions, Renko slams a vase into the old geezer's skull, causing his brain to revert to factory settings again. She immediately claims it was just an accident, and although they can all tell that she is lying, Miro says it's nothing to worry about and takes Jagaru inside. At this moment, Chihiro becomes convinced that he can save Ria with everything he just learned. But then Dune asks why there is a random chick with no plot armor standing in front of him. At this, Ria gets scared because her new life with Chihiro is about to end. But then Chihiro begs Dune to let her stay because he has a responsibility to keep her safe. Dune gets surprised because Chihiro usually never asks him for anything. But after taking a moment to think about everything, he says it's good that Chihiro has finally given up his obsession with zombies. Naturally, Chihiro decides to keep the part about Ria being a zombie to himself. But he still gets shocked when Dune casually says yes to letting Ria stay. After explaining that the temple was actually a refuge for women, Dune says it won't be a problem as long as Chihiro takes full responsibility. As Chihiro then tries to celebrate with Ria, Renko reminds them that she has not agreed to this. Ria immediately realizes that Renko is going to be a problem, unlike Dune, and Chihiro also gets worried about her response, but Renko suddenly calls him a shameless flirt and runs off. Later on, Chihiro decides to start proper research on Ria's life by journaling about every little thing she does. Just then, Ria asks if he can really put up with taking care of her, so Chihiro reminds her that he has always wanted to look after a zombie. She then asks why he has been sleeping in the temple and says she doesn't mind sharing the room with him. But Chihiro says it's for her own safety because the next time her cakes fall on his face, he might not be able to resist. Curious, Ria asks what he is talking about, and after recalling that she has no memory of some of the stuff she did, Chihiro tells her not to worry about it. This time, Ria refuses to believe him because something obviously happened between them, and while Chihiro continues lying about it, Miro wonders how long she can put up with this. The next day, Chihiro decides to take his research to the next level by recording Ria for any signs of changes in her body. However, she gets embarrassed by this and tells him to stop. Much later, Dune asks why she isn't joining them for dinner, so Chihiro tells them not to bother getting food for her because she doesn't want to be any more of a burden to the family. Dune then says it won't be a hassle to have Ria eat with the family, so Chihiro agrees to bring her next time. After dinner, Renko shows up with the supplies she got for Ria and promises to go shopping for plot armor later. Chihiro then thanks her for the help and explains that he doesn't have any special relationship with Ria. After Renko leaves, he heads up and secretly watches Ria feed Babu until she spots him. Much later, he takes Ria out for a walk and continues recording her without realizing that Dan's butler has been following them. Ria suddenly admits that she loves her new life as a slowly decaying corpse and says she would have never gotten to experience it if she had remained a regular girl. Feeling bad, Chihiro promises to make sure she enjoys being a zombie. Eventually, he decides to head back home, but as he tries to cross the road, Ria sees a car speeding towards him and casually throws him out of the way, before realizing that she probably put him in more danger than the car. She immediately runs over to check on him, and after Chihiro claims he is perfectly okay, Ria spots a bruise on his arm. When she suddenly starts licking it, Chihiro gets startled at first, but he ultimately decides to sit back and enjoy it. Days later, Renko clocks in at her parents' restaurant and, after taking care of some of the customers, she enters the back room to verbally assault Chihiro for not doing his job properly. Chihiro immediately tells her to stop interrupting him and says he already regrets coming to help her out. Just then, Renko's mom tells Chihiro to relax and says they are both acting like toxic lovers. Renko gets embarrassed by this and tells her mom to stop, but she takes it a step further by telling Chihiro that he can take Renko to Pound Town anytime he wants. While trying to stop her mom from saying anything else, Renko trips over a banana peel, so Chihiro saves her from a brutal concussion. This leads to even more teasing from her mom, and after she finally leaves, Chihiro suddenly pulls his arm away from Renko to save her from getting teased by the other employees. However, this causes her to feel that he doesn't want to be around her, so she asks why he couldn't just hold on for a little longer before storming out. Many years ago, Renko got lost in a cemetery and started bawling her eyes out in fear, but Chihiro, who also happened to be around, saved her and basically stole her heart. The next day, Renko's parents took her to Chihiro's place for introductions because they didn't even know they were cousins yet. Upon realizing this, Renko got excited and wanted to spend the day doing things Chihiro likes. But after watching a couple of his favorite zombie movies, she was traumatized and got upset after realizing that he didn't even care about her feelings. She eventually suggested that they go play outside like normal cousins, but Chihiro refused, saying that a screen was all he needed for a good time. Renko immediately turned off the television and said he had no choice because she had already forced herself to sit through his weird obsession with scary zombie movies. Chihiro accepted, but while walking together a couple of minutes later, Renko kept trying to find new hobbies that could interest him because all Chihiro wanted to do was yap about his love for zombies. As the day went on, the butterflies in Renko's belly started fading away because she began to realize that her Prince Charming was low-key a strange loner. When a bunch of other locals started making fun of Chihiro for being a loser, she expected him to finally stand up for himself. But Chihiro almost lost bladder control and ran to the cemetery for comfort. This caused Renko to realize that the only reason he wasn't scared the other day was because his mom's grave is there, and he loves the idea of zombies climbing out of their coffins. When they eventually went back home, she was finally over her feelings for him and wanted nothing more than a sweet ride home while her mom was chatting it up with Dune. Minutes later, they got in the car, and her mom asked if she had enjoyed the play date, but she was already tired of talking and just wanted to leave. Back in real time, they have just left the restaurant to make deliveries, but Chihiro quickly gets tired of carrying everything, so he asks Renko why she isn't helping. After Renko says it's because he spent the entire day doing almost nothing in the kitchen, Chihiro asks why she is even helping him since she clearly doesn't want to be here. Renko then explains that his nonchalant attitude will obviously scare their customers away, like that's the only reason she wanted to come with him. Minutes later, they get to Chihiro's house, and Dune immediately tells him to stop complaining before thanking Renko for bringing the food. Much later, they get to the last 2 deliveries of the day, but Chihiro continues ranting about how difficult it is, so Renko asks why he is always against the idea of helping her out. Chihiro then reminds her that he now has to look after Ria, and after he claims that they are still just friends, Renko starts teasing him about it. Right then, Yasutaka shows up and asks, completely losing his mind because Chihiro is already laughing it up with yet another baddie while he still goons to Mogus man buns every night. Yasutaka immediately starts asking him a bunch of questions, hoping to learn his tricks to becoming a playboy. Meanwhile, Renko recalls that she met Chihiro at this exact spot 2 years after their first play date. Back then, he had just moved into town with his family, so her mum decided to invite Chihiro over for a play date. At the time, Renko was already over her feelings for him, but she still wanted to make things work between them, so she tried to play with him outside again. As expected, Chihiro only wanted to watch his stupid zombie movies, so Renko decided to leave him alone so she would catch some of his weirdo vibes. However, after she left the room, her mom convinced her to take Chihiro to the movie rental store so they could find something to watch together. For some reason, Chihiro got excited, and Renko thought there was still hope for their relationship. But when they got to the store, she realized that he was just excited to find a new zombie movie. Just then, the store attendant jump scared her and quickly helped Chihiro find the new zombie movie he wouldn't stop yapping about. Afterwards, Renko tried to tell him about a new series she had just started, but Chihiro paid no attention to her because he couldn't wait to watch the movie. This caused Renko to get fed up, so she grabbed the movie and went to take it back. Chihiro immediately tried to stop her, but a psychotic stray dog suddenly showed up and started barking at Renko, so Chihiro found a place to hide. However, after seeing that it was about to rip Renko to shreds, he put on his big boy pants and grabbed a steel pipe to scare it off. This reignited the spark Renko once felt for Chihiro, so they both walked back home while holding hands, and she finally sat through a zombie movie without nagging him about it. Back in the present, they have just made the last delivery, so Renko tells Chihiro to head home because there is probably nothing else to do at the restaurant. However, when he turns to leave, she suddenly pushes him against the wall and leans in for a kiss. After stopping herself, she tells him to stop freezing up when chicks try to take advantage of him. Before he can respond, she runs off and thinks about the way Ria kissed him until she reaches the edge of the road and decides to stop running from her feelings. Later that night, Ria finally decides to join Chihiro's family for dinner for the first time. But this idiot decides to make it an incredibly awkward experience by recording her plots. Ria eventually tells him to stop, but he insists that he needs to do it so they can track any slight changes in her body. Thankfully, Dune tells him to stop, so Chihiro drops the camera and joins them at the table. Dune then notices that Ria has only been eating grass the entire time, so he asks if she is some sort of hardcore vegetarian. Before she can respond, Jogaru flips out because he has apparently forgotten that clams are edible. Miro then decides to give him a quick lecture about food again. After dinner, Chihiro resumes his research by obsessively staring while she tries to enjoy the bright night sky. Just then, Babu returns and throws up a ball of the leaves they both eat to stay alive. Chihiro quickly grabs the camera, thinking that Ria will also throw up a ball of leaves, but she gets embarrassed by this. However, Chihiro still insists that he has to continue filming her, so Ria decides to let him continue on the condition that he does anything she wants tomorrow. Chihiro easily agrees to this, only to regret it the next day when she drags him along for a shopping spree. After eons of browsing through stores, Ria finally finds something nice, but she gets upset because Chihiro hasn't been paying any attention to her. He then asks why she can't just make up her mind and take something, so she explains how important it is to pick the right one. She also reminds him that it's her first time shopping, but he still tells her to get it over with so he can continue his research. After checking to see if the sun is out, Chihiro wonders if it affects how fast her body decays. At this moment, he realizes that Ria had to go through a horrific accident and a zombie transformation just to experience the most basic girly stuff. While he starts feeling bad for not caring, Renko heads to a public bath to clean her plots. While doing so, she recalls her confession about Chihiro and wonders if he will ever feel the same way about her. Minutes later, she decides to check her weight and suddenly gets pissed by the thought of what Ria is probably doing to Chihiro at this moment. Right then, Miro walks in with a bunch of her friends and is surprised to see Renko not making deliveries, so she asks if the restaurant has been closed down. After explaining that she just didn't have a lot to do, Renko asks Miro why she brought her friends to a bath, and Miro gives the exact same response. Renko then asks if Chihiro is also bored at home, but after Miro tells her about the shopping date with Ria, Renko acts like she doesn't care and decides to join her friends in the bath. By then, Ria has finally selected a dress, and after she puts it on, Chihiro gets surprised by how good she looks in it and compliments her. On the way out, she notices a shopping bag in his hands and asks what it is, but Chihiro tells her not to worry about it. At this moment, a spy who has been following them this entire time calls Dan to tell him that they are in position to execute his plan. However, Dan tells them to continue following Ria for now. Minutes after this, Ria gets intrigued by a prop at a haunted house, so she tries to ask Chihiro for his opinion, only to see that Chihiro has almost pissed himself in fear. She immediately starts laughing at him because he claims to be a horror fanatic. But Chihiro tells her that haunted houses are a lot worse than the movies he watches. Moments later, Ria places her head on a table to rest, so Chihiro takes the opportunity to tell her about a special coat he found that should keep her body cold and preserved because they can stuff it with ice. Seeing that he has put so much thought into helping her, Ria gets emotional but realizes that she can't even produce tears again. However, she promises to help him with his zombie research whenever he needs it. Meanwhile, Dan has completely lost his touch with reality and is fully obsessed with getting Ria back home so they can resume her freaky birthday shoots. The next moment, she becomes hungry, so Chihiro decides to go get some food for himself while she eats the poison leaves. As soon as he leaves, Dan's goons decide to take Ria, but as they get close enough, Yasutaka shows up and suddenly starts talking to Ria like they are besties. Naturally, she gets confused and wonders who on earth this creep is, so Yasutaka reminds her of the time she was looking for Chihiro and asked for his help. He then asks if she wants to go shopping with him, and while she thinks of a way to get away from him, Dan's goons get frustrated because they thought Chihiro was the only guy she knew ultimately. They decide to still follow Ria, but when Yasutaka suddenly grabs her arm and takes off, they worry that he might have seen them stalking her. They then agree that there is no way a slow-brained loser like him saw through their perfect plan. Meanwhile, Yasutaka tries to get Ria to sit at a bench with him like a couple, but she refuses and says she doesn't like being out in the sun. Despite this, Yasutaka continues working his nerd riz on her, but the goons get fed up and put his brain in snooze mode before grabbing Ria. Luckily, her zombie strength makes it impossible for them to overpower her, so she continues struggling and begging for help until Chihiro gets back to the table and heads her screaming from the courtyard. He quickly runs over and sees Ria ripping an entire bench off the floor and swinging it to avoid the goons. Chihiro then calls out to her, so she runs into his arms and explains what happened. When Chihiro asks who sent them, they decide to abduct him instead and manage to pull it off thanks to Chihiro being built like a stick man. While driving off, they call Dan to ask if he wants Chihiro sent to the other side, but Dan tells them to bring Chihiro back so they can finally have a private conversation about Ria. Days before this, Miro was outside cleaning the house when Dune decided to head out and told her not to worry about keeping dinner for him. He also said the same about Chihiro because he was likely going to make something for himself and Ria. After saying that he felt proud of Chihiro for finally stepping up and taking responsibility for one of his decisions, he left. Miro then went up to Chihiro's room to see if she could help with anything, but after seeing that he was already deep into zombie research, she went to her room and spent most of the night writing. The next day at school, a friend named Shinoda brought a newspaper about zombies to prove to Miro that zombies had become a part of society. Another friend named Miko said it was impossible because they would have heard about it everywhere, but Shinoda insisted that it was true and said the government was obviously trying to keep it hidden from the public. When Miko said they needed to see at least one real zombie to believe, Shinoda agreed and said there was actually a zombie very close to them. Miko immediately asked if it was Miro, but Shinoda told her to drop the crazy talk because it was obviously the art teacher. Days before this, Shinoda had forgotten something in the art classes after lessons, so she went to get it back and saw Miss Yamagauchi feeding a creature in her bag while also munching on a huge chunk of raw meat. Upon hearing this, Miro immediately recalled the day she came to school early and saw something moving around in Miss Yamagouchi's bag. At this, Shinoda insisted that she had to be a zombie and said they had to find evidence to prove it. After classes that day, they all stayed back in the art class to wait for Miss Yamagouchi's secret feeding session. As Shinoda predicted, she actually showed up with the same bag. But as she was about to feed whatever demon she was carrying inside it, the girls accidentally knocked over a couple of statues. The next thing, they were all in her car because she obviously needed an explanation for their actions. After minutes of awkward silence, the girls finally asked why she was carrying an alligator to school with her. So Miss Yamagouchi explained that it was actually her pet, and she just couldn't leave it to stay home alone all day. Shinoda then pointed out the fact that she had lost a lot of weight recently, and Yamagouchi explained that the raw meat she had eaten the other day had apparently been causing digestive problems she had never seen coming. The next day, they all decided to resume their zombie investigation because Shinoda was still convinced that The Walking Dead was based on real-life events. This time, Miko claimed she had the perfect tip because she apparently caught a whiff of decaying flesh while going home earlier that week. As expected, she decided to follow the scent and eventually found a trash can packed with bones. At that moment, a strange man grabbed her and asked why she was standing outside his place like a weirdo. Before she could explain, he took her inside to meet his wife, who then offered to fix her a plate of ramen because they were actually testing out recipes to add to their restaurant's menu. Miko agreed, so they served her a bowl of ramen, but the stench made her insides crunch. The strange couple assured her that it tasted a lot better than it smelled, so she foolishly decided to trust them and actually loved it to the point that she almost ate the entire bowl. After listening to her worthless story, Shinoda asked how it helps them find a zombie, so Miko explained that zombies could also be attracted to the smell of bones like she was. Much later, they all went to the playground to hang out, and Shinoda told them that she would never stop looking for zombies because she knew they existed. The next moment, Miro admitted that there was actually a zombie living in her house. After a brief moment of shock, Shinoda told Miro to stop the cap, because there was no way she had been living with a zombie this entire time. Miro then promised them that it was true, so Shinoda said they had to make sure Ria gets exposed to the world. However, Miro stopped her and said her family's temple had a strict privacy policy, meaning that they could not just storm in and expose Ria's existence. Shinoda then asked what it was like living with a real zombie and expected Miro to say that Ria was obsessed with brains. But after Miro explained how Ria only wanted to eat grass and live a normal life, Shinoda was shocked again and wondered what kind of zombie hated eating brains. Unfortunately, Miro also had no idea why Ria was not a blood-hungry monster since Chihiro was the one behind everything, so Shinoda stopped asking pointless questions. Afterwards, they started walking home, and Shinoda suddenly said that Miro's mum should stop him from keeping Ria all to himself. Miko then reminded her that Miro's mum had already kicked the bucket, so Shinoda apologized for being insensitive, but Miro claimed it was no big deal. Later, she made a quick stop at the grocery store and finally headed home. But after seeing that Renko and Chihiro were having the usual argument, she decided to visit her mum in the cemetery. Once there, she saw the snacks Chihiro had been leaving behind and realized that he might not be the lost cause she thought he was. After she also kept some food behind, Ria showed up and said she also wanted to give Chihiro and Renko some space. When she suddenly apologized for crashing into their lives, Miro said she had no problem with it. Ria then commended her for always being so independent and offered to help with some of the chores around the house to make things easier for her. Miro didn't respond, so Ria leaned in to ask again. But then Miro suddenly felt like she was speaking to her mum again. As she started blushing, Ria thought she was running up a fever. But after trying to feel her temperature, she apologized to Miro because she couldn't tell if her skin felt hot or cold. This also triggered a past memory about Miro's mum, so she called Ria mum by accident. She suddenly got embarrassed and tried to run, but she slipped and bruised her ankle, so Ria carried her back home. The next day, Shinoda finally saw Ria and decided not to expose her because she looked so kind and peaceful. Back in the present, Chihiro has just been tied up and kept somewhere in Ria's family mansion. After a maid gives him some water and leaves, he demands to be set free and starts thrashing around, hoping to escape. Minutes later, he continues screaming to be released, but then Aria comes in and tells him to shut up so she can finally get some rest. As she starts complaining about how the entire mansion has been loud over the last few weeks, Chihiro tells her that he didn't plan to get kidnapped by her psychotic husband. At this, Aria realizes that he is the guy Ria ran off with. But instead of getting mad like Dan, she walks over to the bench in front of him to see if he likes her cakes more than he likes Ria's. She then asks if he has taken Ria's V card. But Chihiro gets shocked by how she casually talks about unholy stuff and acts like he doesn't know what she is talking about. Aria notices this and tells him to stop pretending, because there is no way he hasn't tried to get lucky with Ria. After giving it some thought and recalling that Ria is now a zombie, she asks Chihiro if that is why he hasn't cracked. But he gets disappointed because a good mother shouldn't be so eager to hear that her daughter is getting cracked by some zombie-obsessed loner. When he asks Aria why she doesn't seem to care about Ria, Aria says it's because she is not actually Ria's mother. She further explains that she is Dan's second wife, and when Chihiro asks why Ria never said anything, she tells him that it's a well-kept secret within the family. The next moment, Aria decides to tell Chihiro how she ended up with a husband who acts like she doesn't exist. Years ago, she was hired as a maid for Dan, but unlike the usual maids working in the mansion, she and a bunch of other high-level baddies were hired as maids because his family wanted him to pick a wife from them. Unfortunately, Dan had always rejected all the girls they hired for him, so when Aria showed up, the ladies told her to give up because they had started suspecting that he actually liked to give other men back shots instead of women. Upon hearing this, Aria told the girls that he just didn't like them and deluded herself into thinking that she was the special princess who would get to marry him and live happily ever after. Barely a couple of days after she showed up, Dan began to notice her and ended up calling for her any chance he got. However, he only treated her like arm candy and never tried to crack, despite all her efforts to flash her plots in his face. As a result, she also started to believe that he liked taking back shots from guys like you.
Wait a minute!
One day, his family held a fencing tournament to raise funds for disabled people, and Dan, who was already a pro at the sport, easily defeated all his opponents. However, after the last duel, he got pissed at the contender because it became clear that he was intentionally playing soft to let Dan win. After learning that his parents had paid out to the other players, Dan lost it and was upset for the rest of the event. Much later, everyone started heading out, but then a chick in a wheelchair returned Dan's glove to him and said he was wrong to let his emotions overwhelm him. A couple of days after this, he proposed to her, and as expected, his family members completely lost it. They were not about to let the heir of the family marry a nobody who couldn't even stand on her own 2 feet. But Dan had made up his mind. When they tried to force him, he decided that he would rather give up his inheritance and the family name as well because nothing could keep him from marrying her. He also refused to accept any form of disrespect towards her, so his family eventually folded and had no choice but to accept the marriage. However, soon after getting married, she got pregnant with Ria and lost her life while giving birth. Dan fell into a long depression after that and refused to speak or eat, hoping that he would at least reunite with his one true love in the afterlife. Aria refused to accept this and started nursing him every single day until he finally started to talk again and somehow got through the depression. Since Aria had been the only person looking after him, Dan decided to get married to her, and she thought it was finally her turn to ride his pogo stick. However, Dan never invited her to his bedroom after the marriage and wouldn't even look in her direction for years. After listening to all this, Chihiro's virgin mind fails to understand why she is so pissed since she got what she wanted. So Aria explains that married women love to make creamy pies with their husbands, but she hasn't even had the luxury of a good makeout session. At first, she accepted the fact that Dan was just a grieving man who wanted someone to look after him. But the fact that he made her feel so isolated in the family is the main reason she drowned herself in booze and hooked up with any sausage that looked in her direction. At a certain point, she thought it would be a good idea to make an effort with him, so she suggested going on a honeymoon. But all Dan cared about was taking Ria along with them, so Aria ended up alone on her own honeymoon. Despite all the glaring red flags and signs Dan was flashing in her face, Aria still believed she could steal a spot in his heart until the day his butler told her to give up on ever having a romantic relationship with him. She was surprised to hear this and thought he was just trying to intimidate her, but then he took her to the study and pushed back some books to reveal a secret peephole. After looking through it, Aria saw Dan prepping Ria for one of the sick photoshoots he looks forward to every year. With the horrific backstory finally complete, Aria suddenly offers to give Chihiro a taste of her cakes if he wants it. But Chihiro only wants to go home and record Ria's cakes. When Aria tries to get a kiss from him, he falls back just to avoid her, and Aria starts bawling her eyes out while cursing the world for being unfair to her. Just then, Babu shows up, so she grabs him, thinking she can at least get attention from a cat. but Chihiro crushes her hopes again by explaining that Babu is a zombie. Just then, a maid shows up to take Chihiro to Dan, and while he starts yapping about knowing his right, Arya tells the maid to be grateful that Dan finds her useful. Around the same time, Ria gets a taxi to her house because she has just figured out that Dan is behind everything. Meanwhile, Chihiro gets dumped in a dark room and wonders where he is until pictures of Ria start lighting up. He quickly realizes that this is Dan's special place, and Dan finally shows up to thank him for taking care of Ria. He then claims that his love and obsession with her only grew stronger after she became a zombie, but he also promises to make Chihiro pay for making Ria leave him. Minutes later, Dan makes his maid push Chihiro through a dark hallway, and this causes our boy to think his days are numbered, so he asks for a bathroom break, hoping to use that as a chance to escape. The maid then tells him to empty his bladder in the chair if he really needs to go, so he calmly accepts that he is truly about to meet his mom in the afterlife. Dan then promises not to torture him before opening a door to the fencing dojo where he first met Ria's mother. As Chihiro tries to take in how large the dojo is, Dan grabs a fencing sword to spar with him. Despite knowing that he stands no chance against Dan, Chihiro accepts the duel just to show that he is more capable of looking after Ria. By then, Ria has just arrived at the mansion, and her taxi driver excitedly expects to receive enough funds for an early retirement. As soon as she opens the front doors, two maids greet her and say that Dan is a little busy at the moment. Ria tries to ignore them, but then they suggest that she rest a little before the goons from before try to capture her with a net. While she struggles with them, another maid tells Arya that Ria is back, but she asks the maid why any of them would think she cares. By then, Arya has just been thrown into a bed in the basement, and the maids quickly apologize for being rough. She then orders them to take her to Dan, but they start laughing and decide to teach her a thing or two about having good manners. After sensing their evil intentions, Ria tries to use some of that zombie strength, but the maids easily overpower her and change her into a hot costume. She once again orders them to stop and take off the outfit, but for some reason, hearing her act so boldly makes the maids feel hot inside, so they continue messing with her. While they continue using Ria to fulfill their deepest fantasies, Chihiro puts on the fencing suit and calls Dan a cheater because he is obviously already a master at the sport. Dan then tells him to try landing a single hit with any skill he knows, but Chihiro says he has never had the time to learn any martial arts. Pissed off, Dan asks why Ria would run off with such a pathetic weakling when he has every means to keep her protected. At this, Chihiro mocks him because he clearly still has no idea what Ria really wants. By then, the maids have just put Ria in a bunny costume, but this time, she finally flips out and rips the chains off the wall to free herself, which surprises them. At the same time, Dan gets confused by Chihiro's laughter, so Chihiro explains that he is definitely a clueless lunatic because there is no way he thinks a duel with Ria's new bestie will somehow prove that he is a worthy father. Chihiro also calls him a sicko for taking pictures of Ria's plots on her birthdays, and upon hearing this, Dan gets shocked and asks how he knows about it. Using this opportunity, Chihiro decides to teach him how to actually act like a dad. Moments later, Ria finally escapes the freaked-out maids and races to save Chihiro, but just as she enters the dojo, Dan stabs Chihiro right through the guts. Ria and the maids freeze in shock, as they never expected Dan to actually stab Chihiro, but in a shocking twist, Chihiro pulls the blade deeper and lands a devastating headbutt that fractures Dan's skull. Ria immediately rushes to check on Chihiro, but as he tries to respond, her bunny costume finishes him off. He continues yapping about how hot she looks until Dan asks why he is not already in heaven because the sword is still in his belly. Chihiro initially thinks it's just adrenaline, but after recalling the night Ria treated his injuries with her tongue, he realizes that her saliva must have given him some of that zombie strength. Frustrated, Dan grabs the next sword to finish off Chihiro, but Ria runs in and blocks the attack before telling Dan to stop. For some reason, Dan is surprised that she is stopping him from unaliving her bestie, so he asks why she is getting in the way despite knowing that he is doing this to make her happy. He further explains that while Chihiro is too broke and weak to protect her, he has already secured a flight out of the country so they can get her started on a treatment to restore her humanity. To his greatest shock, Ria tells him to stick the plane tickets up his backside because she would rather live a short but happy life with Chihiro than remain miserable with Dan. Totally crushed, Dan asks Ria if the little freedom she currently enjoys with Chihiro is worth rejecting everything he has ever done for her. Just then, Chihiro grabs him and asks if he has ever stopped to ask Ria what truly makes her happy. instead of just assuming that he knows best. Upon hearing this, Dan thinks back to all the times he turned down Ria's requests over the years and finally realizes that he made her miserable. Upon seeing that he is finally accepting his faults, Chihiro decides to stop roasting him and also admits that he doesn't have everything that Ria needs to easily experience the regular life she dreams of. After he asks Dan to help with the important stuff, Dan asks Ria if she really prefers being roommates with a broke zombie addict over living in a mansion with her freaky daddy. To nobody's surprise, she says yes, so Dan decides to let her continue staying with Chihiro, but he insists that it's only until he finds a permanent cure for her condition. Just then, he grabs Chihiro and promises to make peanut butter with his nut sack if he even thinks of cracking Ria. After he leaves, Chihiro tries to act like he has never wanted Ria's zombie kitty, but then adrenaline wears off and he suddenly passes out. Much later, Dan takes off in his private jet to start working on a cure for Ria, while Chihiro wakes up in bed and sees all the worried faces looking at him. Upon seeing Ria's hot outfit, he completely ignores them to enjoy her beauty, and she explains that the maids made her put it on because they knew he would like it. He immediately tries to clap her in his mind, but Renko barges in and dives into his wounded body while frantically asking if he is okay. After he says she definitely just made it worse, she apologizes before asking how he got hurt. Right then, Ria takes the blame and tries to apologize for putting him in danger, but Renko stops her from saying anything else and suddenly claims that she is Chihiro's fiancée. Chihiro immediately denies this and thinks Renko has finally lost it, but then she reminds him of the time he agreed to marry her while they were at a playground. Chihiro says he obviously didn't mean it and continues denying her until she tells him not to worry because she was only teasing him. However, as she continues checking on him, Ria starts feeling bad for Renko because it is now clear that she has feelings for Chihiro. Days later, Chihiro begins second-guessing his decision to take care of Ria. He wonders if Dan was right about him being a useless loser, but he decides to focus on the fact that he is finally living with a plot-heavy baddie, like he always wanted. Much later, while having dinner, Jaguru loses common sense again and forgets that onions are edible, so Miro explains to him. Just then, Dune asks Miro what she made for Ria, so Miro reminds him that Ria only eats grass. Dune gets confused and asks how she can survive on poison leaves alone, but this makes Ria uncomfortable, so she offers to go back to eating alone in Chihiro's room if her poison diet is too much for Dune to handle. Upon hearing this, Chihiro tells Dune to stop asking her a bunch of questions anytime they are having dinner, but Dune claims he was just curious and wanted to know why she couldn't eat regular food. All of a sudden, Jaguru lunges at Ria, trying to grab her, but Chihiro puts him to sleep and tells Ria that it's perfectly normal for Jaguru to act like this. Dune also apologizes for how strange their family can be sometimes, but Ria claims to be perfectly okay with it. However, after dinner, Chihiro continues to think that she is getting fed up with the toxic life she is experiencing with his family, so he takes her out to a nice spot under a bridge to talk. When he apologizes for only being able to bring her to a dusty old bridge, Chihiro says she actually loves it because taking a simple walk at night is something Dan would have never allowed. She then asks if they can go see the fireworks festival happening tomorrow night because she was also never allowed to go to one. He easily agrees to it, so she promises to keep her body from decaying so they can have a good time together. Chihiro gets a little surprised by this statement, so he tells her not to worry because her body can't fall apart in a single day. Minutes later, they start heading home, and Chihiro gets zoned out because now he can't stop thinking of a possible way to stop Ria's body from decaying. When they eventually get back home, Ria notices that she isn't coming up to the room, so she asks why, and he explains that he just has a couple of things to do. Minutes later, he goes to Jaguru's room, hoping to get help from the old lunatic, but after seeing that Jaguru is already asleep, he decides to call it a night. Just then, Miro shows up and asks why Ria isn't going back to school. Chihiro tells her that it's obviously not that simple, but Miro insists that it is because he only has to cover up Ria's scars and get her some makeup so people won't see that she is a zombie. At this, Chihiro recalls when he promised Ria a normal life, which would involve going to school like everyone else, but the fact that her body literally falls apart in the sun makes this a huge problem. The next day, the fireworks festival was cancelled because the clouds finally decided to let all the water out. Ria then asks Chihiro to take her to the next one if she lives long enough to see it. Upon hearing this, Chihiro gets upset and immediately continues his research to keep her alive. The next day, while walking to school, Yasutaka gets pissed about the rain because he also wanted to go see baddies at the festival. Just as he tries to show Chihiro the hot girls on the other walking trail, Ranko slams into Chihiro with her jugs to say hi. While she talks to him, Yasutaka wonders if he has some kind of baddie repellent curse that makes girls avoid him. Much later, Chihiro tells Ranko about the festival and how he wanted to take Ria since it would have been her very first one. Ranko then tells him to just make his own fireworks festival instead of waiting a whole year for another festival that might also get cancelled. Several minutes later, Miro returns home and feels uneasy seeing Ria cleaning up, so she asks for the broom. However, while trying to give it back, Ria accidentally uses zombie strength and snaps it in two. At that moment, Chihiro shows up and gets concerned seeing Ria outside, but she assures him that it's cool since most of the day has been cloudy. He then tells her about a plan to make their own fireworks festival, and Ria gets excited. But when he mentions that Ranko will be coming soon to help her wear a yukata, Ria loses her excitement. Unfortunately, Chihiro's virgin brain still doesn't understand how chicks work, so he heads inside, and Miro also decides to get started on dinner while Ria stays back to try to find his broom. Much later, Ranko shows up and greets Dune before explaining what they have planned for the night. Just then, Chihiro walks out already wearing his yukata and explains that Miro helped him put it on. Since it's only Ria left, Ranko heads up the room to help her with the dress, and Ria takes this opportunity to ask Ranko about her relationship with Chihiro. After admitting that she hated his guts at first, Ranko says he actually grew on her until she accepted everything that is still wrong with him. After getting Ria fully dressed, Ranko asks if she is lying about being a zombie because she looks better than some of the baddies at school. Ria immediately tells her to stop the cap because her skin has been decaying for weeks. But Ranko gets closer for a sniff and tells Ria that she looks completely normal. She also assures Ria that Chihiro will find a way to keep her alive, but then Ria says he would probably be better off without her. For the first time, Ranko runs out of pep talks, so Ria asks if she has feelings for him. After easily admitting to it, Ranko asks the same question, but Ria freezes up. Ranko notices how nervous she is and says she will be keeping Chihiro all to herself, hoping to get a reaction from Ria. However, she easily agrees with this, so Ranko asks why she is not making an effort despite knowing that her time is running out by the day. Ria responds that Ranko obviously has a closer relationship with Chihiro, while she is just the traumatized rich brat he has to babysit every day. Ranko then tells Ria to go all out for what she really wants, and after Ria promises to do so, they leave the room to start the low-budget fireworks festival. Minutes later, Chihiro takes Ria to the side and asks if she is truly happy doing all this boring stuff with him. Ria then reminds him that the things he sees as boring are a dream come true for her because she never got to experience them growing up. The next day, Ria returns to Dan's mansion, but the maids get excited to see her. She explains that she only came to get stuff for school. After packing up, she turns to leave and sees Arya, who has been waiting to say that she will not offer Ria any help if something goes wrong at school. Ria calmly accepts this and heads out to meet up with Chihiro before they go up to the abandoned hotel to talk. Ria finally admits that she wants to spend all her time doing the things she has always dreamt of. Chihiro also says that he wants nothing more than to keep her around forever. But as he starts explaining all the things they will do together, Ria's rotten heart skips a beat, so she pulls him down for an intense kiss. Is Chihiro finally going to get the zombie happily ever after he always wanted? Or will Ria's body break down before they can take things to the next level? Comment Freaky Zombie if you want the second part, and don't forget to turn on post notifications and leave a like if you enjoyed this recap.